Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for joining us in class today. We broadcast 2 hours, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And if you would like to call us, Jason will answer the phone and we'll put you on the air. That number is 866-582-9933. And we have a telephone listen line that's up 24/7, 605-477-3249. I'm Vincent Finelli. With us on Tuesdays, Rich Scheben, Off-Grid, Montana. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Vince. How you doing this morning?
You know, Rich, I am doing really well. Interesting. I have an interesting story to share with you. But first, let me talk about phone calls. Class, the phone here at the farm is ringing off the hook. I cannot talk to one person without 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 phone calls trying to come through while I'm talking to each person. And on top of that, I have a job. My job is the farm. And I am busy. This is farming season. I am busy nonstop from early in the morning till very late at night. So it's very difficult for me to get to the phone. And I don't have a cell phone, and I won't have a cell phone. So I'm not on tap 24/7. But I try to return phone calls that come in the evenings. But I can't get to everybody because there's so many phone calls. So here's my request. Number one, if you can send me an email rather than chat on the phone, that would be good. Okay? And you can send that to instructor@usaprepares.com. And put your name on the subject line. And that way it'll stand out. And very brief message. Please don't send me a lot to read, because if you do, I can't read it. So a very brief message, and I'll do my best to get back to you. But I can't promise that. Second thing is I've unhooked our answering machine. I get so many messages that I can't get to them either. So if the phone rings more than 3 times, no one's here to answer the phone. Okay? If the phone rings more than 3 times, no one's here to answer the phone. So just hang up, because you're not going to get anybody. So those are my requests. And so here's a quick story. What's wrong with America? So yesterday, I was on pursuit of getting a part for our old Jeep. It's 25 years old. It's a 1994 Jeep Wrangler. 4-cylinder, 4-wheel drive, automatic transmission. Bought it used. For less than we would pay for a little tiny 4-wheeler. So the transfer case cracked. It's got an aluminum housing. It's in 2 halves. And one of the halves has a crack in it, and it leaks the transmission oil out of the transfer case. So I went to eBay, and I can buy one used, but I have no idea the condition, between $400 and $800, and remove the old one and replace it with a different one from eBay. I decided I'd rather see it rather than just have it shipped in. So I called some of the salvage yards in the Springfield, Missouri area. I called one guy in a big salvage yard, and I said, have a 1994 Jeep Wrangler with an automatic transmission and a 4-cylinder. My name is Vincent, and I'm looking for a transfer case. Do you have one? Nope. Thank you very much. And that's the way it is. I mean, these guys are curt, quick, short, and they don't even say thank you most of the time when they hang up on you. Well, call the next guy. And I said the same thing. I have a 1994, my name is Vincent. I have a 1994 Jeep Wrangler, 4-cylinder, automatic transmission, and I'm looking for a transfer case. The guy said, hold on. Came back and he said, what kind of a wiring harness were you looking for? I said, I'm not looking for a wiring harness. I'm looking for a transfer case. And he said, hold on. Didn't have one. And I said, well, do you think you might have a half of a case, like the front half, because that's what's broken on ours? And he said, well, let me get your name and number, and let me see if I can find one. He said, I've only been on the job for 3 weeks. I said, I know. And I said, you know what? I'll tell you what. Forget it. I'm just going to make some more calls and see if I can find, what I need. Thank you very much. I was really frustrated because this guy didn't even know what a transfer case was. He wasn't paying attention. He literally had to ask me twice what I was asking for. And I decided I wasn't going to spend any more time with him. So we placed another call to another company in Springfield. And we got this older guy, about my age. And he said he didn't have a transfer case, but, if we just needed like the front cover, the front half, he had one of those. And he said he would put it on the counter along with the gasket set that goes with it and the seals, and we'd be good to go. So I went to pick it up yesterday. Guy had white hair, completely different from the millennial I talked to. So this guy actually knew his job. The millennial didn't know his job. Now, do you think I'm going to call the guy where the millennial worked? Do you think I'm going to call him again and waste more of my time? It's not likely, right? That's what's wrong with America. We have people in jobs. I think they get hired. Do you have a pulse? Good. Do you think you can show up, most days? Good. Do you think you can show up at, 8 o'clock in the morning? Most days? Good. You're hired. Do you know anything about cars? No. Okay. Well, that's not a problem because we just want you to answer the phone. Well, I'm not willing to call people who don't know what they're doing. I'm not willing to waste any more of my life on people who don't know what they're doing and shouldn't be in these positions in the first place. So it's going to be a cold day in hell before I call them again. Rich Scheben, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to constantly see a direct proportion of lack of customer service and proven results and qualifications and hard work and effort. Because I've mentioned this for years, when you lower the bars of standards and expectations based on what group you're from, this work ethic will metastasize like a cancer, and it's only going to go in one direction, and that is down. So when you lower the bars of standards and expectations, for decades, pretty soon you devalue work. There's no appreciation for it. There's no dignity in it. And that's what we get. That's the short answer, Vince.
Rich, but from my perspective, I have not lowered my standards. That's where the problem is.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about industry. I'm talking about the stores. I'm talking about the corporations. I'm talking about the fascist system that has put a squeeze on, especially on the small businesses and the mom and pops, because they've created so much lobbying, so many regulations, so many subsidies, so many special interests and PACs that it's almost impossible for the little guy to compete. And I even see the little guy looking at his math, looking at his balance sheets, and he's saying, well, why should I try hard? Because it looks like we'll be closing our doors shortly. And that's one of the reasons I want to talk about I give an Economic 101 update today sometime, Vince, because I have not done that in several weeks. But the numbers, the math does not look good, and I think people are giving up.
Mm-hmm. And what I was saying is, yes, the standards and expectations from the companies have been lowered, but my expectations and my standards have not changed. I still expect people to know what in the heck they're doing if they're between me and the cash register. I really mean that. And and I expect them to live up to the warranties that they say are in place when they sell me those items that I buy. I don't expect them to renege, and if they do, I go nuts. I lose it. By the way, I mentioned that I had a problem with Sam's Club in the optical department, and there was this millennial there who told me that if I wanted to have the glasses that they just called and told me that came in, that they had made for me, that I had already paid in advance for, that if I wanted them tinted, I would have to, you'll have to pay for it. You'll have to come in and pay for it before we'll tint them. And I lost it right then and there on the phone. Well, I met with senior management. I told them what they're doing that is unacceptable to me. They agreed with me. And I decided that I was not going to pick up the glasses. I just didn't want to go to that store anymore. It's in Springfield, Missouri. I didn't want to go to Sam's Club because I was so outraged that they have these jerks working for them. These people who it bothers me that I'm paying $100 a year for these people to be in my way. It bothers me. Well, on Saturday, we got a package in the mail, and I got my glasses. I ordered one pair. I paid for one pair. I got two. I got two sets of glasses, two glass cleaning wipes that say Sam's Club on them, and two glass cases. And I got a $50 gift certificate, and I got a $100 gift certificate. I guess they thought I meant what I was saying. I took them to task. I was furious. And I still don't know if I want to go back to Sam's Club, because I don't want to be in the presence of that guy who's demanding that I come in. Who is he to tell me? I'm the customer. Who is he to tell me anything? He can ask me, but he's not going to demand anything of me, because I don't take direction very well, especially from young twerps. I told his boss and I told the store manager that if he worked for me, he would have been fired 10 minutes ago. And I mean it. I can't stand it. So, let's see. Yesterday, I want to talk about loyalty. Before you get into your economic update, I'd just like to talk about loyalty and how I have changed my policy about loyalty. Yeah, I have. I've decided that I am not going to be loyal to any corporation. If they're not loyal to me, I am not loyal to them. And I'll tell you exactly what that means when we come back. Plus, I asked GCN management if they can reduce the number of commercials that we have on USA Prepares. 6 of those commercials belong to me, and I give them away, so I'm not going to do that anymore. I asked them if they could take my 6 commercials and just do away with them to give us more talk time. And they said, yes, they can do it, but it's going to take about a couple months. They're on a big programming project right now. So we're going to have fewer commercials, and I'm looking forward to that. Loyalty. I'm no longer loyal to any corporate business because they're not loyal to me. They keep changing their conditions, their terms, their prices. They keep lowering the quality and increasing the prices. So because they're not loyal to me, I'm not loyal to them. They taught me this. So Menards sent us a notice that they're having an 11% sale, and I don't like Menards any more than I like any other large store. Well, they had the best price on water softener salt, $5.11 per bag. So they didn't have it. So I got a rain check for 400 pounds. And they had dog food that was the best price with their 11% off sale. And I ordered that, but they didn't have that. So I got a rain check. So I went yesterday to pick it up. And so I paid in advance so I could get the 11% off. Normally I wouldn't do that, but if anything went wrong, I could always dispute the charge on my credit card. But it seemed to be working okay. And the gal behind the counter had this thing in her nose, some kind of an antenna. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's filthy. It's non-hygienic. But that's what she had. And if I hadn't prepaid, I would have walked out the door. That is my take on what's happening. Why Why do stores, large corporations, hire people who look like freaks, look like they just left the circus? Why? I don't like it. I really don't like it. And, you know, there are other people who don't like it as well. I had a doctor's appointment yesterday, and I really love this guy, my doctor, my pulmonologist. He is absolutely fabulous. He lets me do what I want to do. And, you know, the nurse brings me and Mrs. Finelli into the exam room, and we always go, nobody goes alone to any doctor's appointment. So everybody in the family knows what's happening, what the recommendations are, what the discussion is. So that's the way we do things. We have a 1950s style family. So the nurse brings us into the room, and I see on the wall a sign that looks like a cell phone. It has a red circle with a line slashed through it. And I pointed to it, and I asked the nurse about that. And she said, oh, well, you know, if the doctor comes in and someone's on their cell phone, he walks right out, and they have to reschedule. Is that brilliant or what? So I was talking to my buddy Howard Shane. He's a dentist. And I said, Howard, I was talking with him for a couple minutes yesterday. And I said, Howard, so, you know, you get your dental patients in the chair. Your assistant brings the patient back to the chair. You're ready to recline the chair and start working. And the patient's on the cell phone. Does that happen? He said, it does. So what do? He said, it's not good. They're wasting their time and they're wasting my time. I don't like it. That was the upshot of what he said. Rich Scheben, your thoughts on this? People who are rude, stupid, offensive, non-hygienic, in our way between what we're trying to get done?
Yeah. Well, times have definitely changed, and I'm going to stick to what I said earlier. And I've been saying this for years, and it's obviously coming to fruition. When you lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting or keeping a job based on what group you're in, it's going to metastasize through our cultural traditions and heritage like cancer. And it has. Now, as far as loyalty to a company, the bottom 93% of income earners cannot afford to be loyal. They go where it's cheaper. Unfortunately, when things are cheaper, and I say cheaper, not less expensive, because I'm saying that for a reason, cheaper is an implication, meaning that they're also going to get lower quality, and that's all the little people can afford. Now, as far as metallic rings sticking out of different parts of the body and tattoos everywhere, and I just do that in because they kind of go together for young people, it's very rare. I know some very, unless they're super religious homeschool people, which I know.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. People do some pretty weird things to impress their friends, and in this line of thinking, I just wanted to mention that at the university, when I was attending back in the 1970s, there was this black fraternity, and the fraternity, they did something kind of amazing. It's called Alpha. And this particular, the nickname was Alpha. And the pledges would wear a dog collar around their neck, a dog collar. And attached to the dog collar was a dog leash. Attached to the dog leash was a red brick. I'm talking about the kind of red brick that you would build a house with, or a commercial building of yesteryear. And these guys always had to have their brick for probably a month. They had to have their red brick with them for a month. And then, to top it off, after the pledge period, they got to be branded. Yeah, literally branded with a hot branding iron. So there are some famous people who have been branded, members of black fraternities, with names like Reverend Jesse Jackson and Michael Jordan. Yeah, they're branded. And we've been talking about things that I find offensive to look at, like, you know, rings that have been put through someone's nose, antennas, piercings, tattoos, and brandings. Rich Scheben, you were talking about that. Please continue.
Yeah, well, branding, it was a sex cult, and I think there's going to be a lot of information coming out on that. I think most of our listeners have read about it, and there was some very big names behind it. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that transpires, and they were branding women. So in the in the abdomen area. And, this is one of the reasons why we always say, or at least I do, adult, mutual, consensual sex. This isn't big, innovative words. This isn't new innovations. This isn't going to the moon. This isn't curing cancer. It's just common sense. Adult, mutual, consensual sex. No pedophilia. And mutual and consensual, those definitions stand on their own. So that's where, pardon my little sidebar here, but going back to your metallic rings and tattoos, that's what young people do, and they don't care if it's visible, they don't care if it's hidden. In fact, they kind of like it being visible. That's just the way that generation is. What's happening is when you look at those bars of standards and expectations for a job, you look at the millennial worker participation rate compared to when we were working. We talked about this privately just yesterday, Vince. I was cutting grass, tending gardens, raking leaves, working landscaping, from an early teenage, even though I was in school or I had football practice or whatever it was. I always was working mostly off the books doing something. And today, when you look at the millennial worker participation rate, it's extremely low. So employers almost have to take what they can get. So, the math is quite disturbing when you look at where we're going as a nation, as a Western world, and as a global economy. Vince?
Rich, you said something very disturbing to me on the phone privately. And it wasn't because it was offensive. It wasn't because it was not polite. It was disturbing because it's true. And I'd like to have part of that discussion with you today, right in front of our broadcast classroom. And what you were mentioning is that, you've been working really hard on your farm. You're making it better. You're improving it every day. You're taking what was of lesser quality and made it better. I'm not saying it wasn't nice to begin with. I'm just saying you improved it. You're building it up, building it up, building it up. Everything you do is making it more valuable, more valuable. And the same thing is happening here in Missouri at our farm. We are working on it all the time. I mean, when I'm in the studio, the rest of the family is out improving it in every way you can think of. Repairing fences, mowing fields, liming fields, taking care of the cattle, putting up temporary fencing, making sure the cows graze and fertilize with their manure in the right way to make the property better than it was. Not destroy it, not dump motor oils and things like that on it like corporations do. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about improving it. But what you said was disturbing, and now it is. Okay, so if we ever decided to sell this, or you decided to sell yours, now that we've made it better, who would buy it? Not only who would buy it, who could buy it? That was really disturbing, Rich. Would you please tell us what you meant? Because, class, sit down. You're not going to believe what you're about to hear.
Well, I'm going to say the good, bad, and ugly. I'll start with the good. Is there a mass exodus out of California and Illinois and the Northeast states coming to the Idahos and western Montanas of the world? Yes, absolutely. But when you look at good old, and that's why I want to go to the economic warnings and basically gives a bunch of reasons why interest rates will probably go down. But this whole system is so rigged, who knows what's going to happen. But when you look at Generation X, now keep in mind, folks, demographic-wise, through 2050, the largest growth group, demographically speaking, are old people. That means the end of the World War II generation, the baby boomers, and we're even seeing some Gen Xers, if that is the next generation after the baby boomers, starting to retire as well, especially if they were much earlier. So that being said, when you look at the work ethic, the savings, the debt, you just look at all the fundamentals, never mind the ambiguity of what is the value of the Federal Reserve note going to be down the road. And adding on to that is, are we going to have the world reserve currency status? Are we going to be backed by silver and gold? Are we going to have some type of domestic dollar or international dollar? Are we going to have, who knows if silver and gold is going to shine, because it's the most manipulated, corrupt industry out there. Not from the people's end, but from the powers that be end. And I've talked about naked shorts in great detail many times. Whenever you have a paper price and a physical price, everything's going to be distorted. So then there's cryptocurrencies. We're in an era where valuations, earnings, all these words that have been that had definitions years ago: solvency, inflation, deflation, the fine line between that, markets, fundamentals, fair value, leverage, liquidity, valuations, GDP, credit, debt, core businesses of corporation, money printing, free market, supply and demand, velocity of money, profits. All these definitions now are very ambiguous. And it's done that way on purpose to make sure the system stays afloat for X amount of time. Because we're not only in the end of an economic cycle, we're at the end of a central bank cycle. So when you look at the young people and their earnings, okay, take the Generation Xers, you take the millennials. Now, I see some hope in Generation Z, but that's yet to be determined. But when I see their opportunities because of political correctness, not getting a job through hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications, it basically makes people give up. It makes people try to become more self-sufficient, even though it's harder. But how are they going to buy our properties for a profit under circumstances of so much ambiguity? And this is when I give my economic 101 updates, I don't try to do gloom and doom. I try to give you information on how you can prepare. That's one of the reasons I talk about why buy a house in a subdivision for $300,000-$400,000 and get a 30-year amortization schedule where the first 7.5 years is 98% interest. You're literally pissing money out the window instead of putting it in your pocket. Why go to a subdivision which hampers your freedoms, tells you what to do, makes you pay HOA monthly charges, and you got to pay high electric bills and garbage bills and all this other stuff, versus going to rural America somewhere, buying a 20-acre parcel of land, and going all over western Montana. I'm sure this is a phenomenon all over the country. There's contractors, carpenters, who are literally building shops, guest cabins, garages, barns, etc. And they literally have the hydraulics to build on their site and transport that building. I'm getting a garage built for me right now, folks. 24 foot long, $6,700. Let me repeat that. I'm getting a 24-foot garage built for me, $6,700. So let's say you wanted to buy one of these buildings for like 10, 15 grand. Put it on 20 acres, have it delivered. You live in it, you put a wood stove, you insulate it, and you build it the way you want, kind of like the cabin I live in. And then you live off grid, you learn skill sets, you garden, you raise animals, you have a higher quality of life, you control your own destiny, and you have fun doing it. And these are just a few of the examples that we talk about on USA Prepares on a regular basis. But as far as the cookie-cutter, follower, politically correct, tattletale subdivision neighborhood, where they tell you what to do, how to live, how to, everything, and then the taxes and insurance are so high, the next generation can't even look at it as a quality of life enhancer, because they're already entering the equity market so late because of the leverage that they have on their loans and the time leverage they're going to lose on building equity because they're coming into the market so late. So it's time to think outside the box, folks. I hear the music, Vince. It's all yours.
Yeah, I've got a couple comments when we come back. You're absolutely right. And the comments that I have will address what you just said. It's kind of bleak if you think about you build something up and then, at some time you'll be selling it, but to whom? But Shealy, I've been thinking about what you've been saying, and most people get it backwards. Most people have a larger house on a tiny lot. A larger house on a tiny lot, instead of having a larger piece of ground in a smaller house. Or even worse than that, they have a tiny apartment. And the average size apartment is getting smaller. Today, the average size apartment is 934 square feet. A studio apartment has gotten 18% smaller in the last 10 years. A studio apartment used to be 614 square feet 10 years ago. Now it's 504 square feet. That's about the size of our kitchen. That is claustrophobic. Now, if you have an apartment that's 504 square feet, you're going to be next to other apartments that are 504 square feet. You're going to be jam-packed in there like sardines with other people. It makes absolutely no sense to do that. Rents are going up. Square footage is going down. Why? Why would anybody do that?
Well, keep in mind, too, Vince, that square footage of your structures are directly proportional to your taxes, insurance, and maintenance. So if you had land and lived in a smaller home, now, some people say, look at what the wealthy people are doing. I'll tell you what the wealthy people are doing. They're buying land right now, hand over fist, bare land, hand over fist. Now, for us little people, I suggest buying, that 20-acre dream ranchette. But when you buy it, make sure you buy something that has varied topography. And what I mean by that is ridges, draws, meadows, water. Could be surface water, could be a good aquifer. And I say that because the more varied, even bedrock, that's the perfect land to buy because it doesn't take much of a footprint to build your home or your barn or your garage or your shop or however you want to live. So it's up to you to decide on what your lifestyle is. I call this a hobby farm because everything I do on it, from hunting and fishing to gardening to raising animals, everything, harvesting my firewood is a hobby to me. So that's why I call it a hobby farm. Now, that being said, if you have varied topography, you're going to ensure you're not going to have major subdivisions around you. You might have a minor subdivision, which is 5 homes or less, but you'll never have a major subdivision, which would be hundreds, if not thousands of homes, which I've seen many people buy flat land, especially old pasture ground, and then they end up cursing their life because they had a subdivision move in next to them. So you got to think with foresight that way, because the more varied topography you have, the less septic approvals you're going to have. Okay? So that's the way you got to think. It's use the topography as a buffer, if you will, to keep your homestead private. Vince?
I totally agree. And if you're looking for land, I would suggest you consider the following. You don't want to be in an area that floods. So you don't want to be below a dam. You don't want to be near high tension, meaning high voltage power lines. You want to be away from industry, because industry has a history of polluting the land and the aquifers. You want clean water. You don't want to be in a desert. You don't want to be near a nuclear reactor or a power plant. You want to, in the varied topography, we're talking about woods. We're talking about some open land, some grass. We're talking about freedom from being close to neighbors. We're talking about low taxes, freedom from government oppression. You don't need a police department. You can take care of yourself. We do. We like the idea that the cops are at least 20 miles away. We like that. We like the fact that there's no dog warden, no animal control. We like the fact that the cops here are few and far between. We like the fact that there's no building inspections. There's no permits needed to build buildings. I can't imagine what it would be like if I had to apply to some jerk to ask that person, would it be okay if I spent my own money to build a building on my own property? And is this design okay with you? I can't imagine that. That's nuts. But that's the way it is in most places. And most places are controlled by these homeowner associations, which you get the privilege of paying for every year. Hundreds of dollars, if not thousands. It's crazy. So, think about what's happening and where you want to be. All set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us. And, class, something to think about, gas prices. I just went to GasBuddy.com and I looked up gas prices in Springfield, Missouri, because they're shooting up very quickly. Regular, the cheap stuff, is $2.59 a gallon yesterday. Premium is $3.09. California, regular ranges between $4.39 and $3.89 and $4.79 a gallon for gasoline, regular, in Los Angeles. The premium gasoline in Los Angeles ranges from $4.39 to $5.39 a gallon. Why is that? Well, oil prices are up because the Trump administration announced that they ended the Iranian oil waivers. So we are not inclined to like the idea that countries are buying oil from Iran. So we're making it more difficult. And these oil waivers, the end of these oil waivers, are removing about what is the amount? About 1 million barrels a day from the market. Removing 1 million barrels of oil a day from the market, which is causing prices of oil to spike. So you're probably going to see increases for a while longer. How long? I don't know. But prices have gone up, and we decided late last night that we were going to top off our tanks and make sure we have gasoline for chainsaws and our equipment to keep the farm operational without paying the new and improved higher prices. Rich, are you seeing any signs of this in your neck of the woods?
Well, sure. This is a national, worldwide story. Big reason why oil is going up because Saudi has to bring their oil prices up in order to sell this big company that they want to sell. And then you have the tar sands running out of easy-to-find oil. You have Russia and Saudi agreeing together to lower production. You have lack of pipelines and lack of new refineries to collect this oil. The powers that be want to bring down freedom in America, so they're using Cloward and Piven strategies. One example is increasing and overwhelming the system with immigration. So if they can also raise oil prices dramatically, that can also bring down the economy. And you have to remember that a lot of these prices are manufactured prices because supply is still pretty high. So the fact that we are the number one exporter and we have 1,000-year supply of natural gas, there's no reason why oil should go up, but because of the other outside influences, they are. So, when everything happens, financially or economically, and socially and politically in this country, it's basically done. There's always behind-the-scenes reasons. Pardon the analogy. It's just like all this crap about Russian collusion. Okay, the main reason the Mueller report was created and went this long, it was so the Democrats could win Congress in 2018, not by merit, but by manufacturing perception. So everything out there behind the scenes has false stories, anonymous sources, lies, propaganda, smear campaigns. It's to hold the narrative at all the costs. So for us patriots, for the little guy, the bottom 93% of income earners, it doesn't matter what we do. We can cure cancer. We can create something that will give every person in America the ability to live to 250 years old. We can create wealth for everyone. it doesn't matter. We are still going to be demonized by the super wealthy powers that be because of their addiction to power, money, and control. And this is why I tell everybody to read up, research up, and speak up in that order. We have to think for ourselves, because when you see a heading, when you see especially something that comes from the mainstream media, they are selling us a narrative. And usually you got to play chess and play it for 4 or 5 moves to see why they're doing something. Because thinking outside the box, thinking for ourselves, using common sense and logic, and demanding truth is all we have. Because they're going to throw isms, and phobias and try to demonize, discredit, and delegitimize the people at every turn. And you can see how some of the ways they do it. They use the biggest celebrity names, actors, singers, athletes, businesses, big business people, and they increase the probability of fake news by using celebrity status, and they don't allow the individual to have ideas and solutions. They're following scripts and saying the same message on every station from every celebrity in order to save the status quo. In other words, they're not doing anything for the people. They're just attacking freedom and liberty, the rule of law, truth, accountability, and self-sufficiency. So you got to remember, when we start this conversation, is oil going up? It looks like it is. But you got to go behind the scenes and play chess for 4 or 5 moves to see why it's going up. Because the powers that be are always going to sell the people a false narrative, a false story, and they're going to come up. They're not going to have real sources. Everything's going to be anonymous. Everything is going to be lies, propaganda, hoaxes, and false flags. Everything. Almost 100%. Everything. Maybe 6% is true, analogous to a lost leader or a product in a supermarket. They're going to make certain products go on sale and give them away inexpensively to get you in the store. And that's how they do it. Vince?
Just as a side note about the kind of jives with what we're talking about today. So I got under our Chevy pickup truck. It's a 2004 model work truck. Nothing fancy, very plain. And I saw that the front stabilizer is broken. You might call it a sway bar. It's also called a front stabilizer. And this is almost completely broken off. And what Chevrolet has done in their quest to lower the cost and lower the quality of their vehicles, I believe they used a process called hammer forging. So they take a heavy bar of steel, they bend it, and then for the ends, they hammer forge on another piece of steel. And that breaks off under the stress and under moisture getting in between the 2 pieces of steel that they hammer forge together. In the winter, it gets damp, and when water freezes, it expands and it breaks off this end. So that's what Chevy did. And I went to get a replacement. I asked our son to pick up a replacement sway bar from an auto salvage yard yesterday, and he brought it back, and I can see why the first one failed. Because the second one, if we don't weld it together on the ends, it'll fail the same way the first one did. So what I'm talking about is, I know that we're not the only one that has a broken sway bar or stabilizer on the front of the truck. So you're driving around the highways and byways, and there are vehicles that have broken parts because of the cheapening of the quality of the manufacturing of parts on your vehicle. I have very little confidence that the vehicles that are surrounding me on the interstate are in sufficient condition to be safe. I don't believe that most of them are. Why? Because I see them. I get under these vehicles that are brought to our farm for repairs. It's unbelievable, the condition. I'm talking about U-joints that are just about broken off. A U-joint holds the drive shaft on. Imagine driving behind a pickup truck, and you're 5 car lengths behind, or 7, and the drive shaft falls off. Oh, and it's 6 feet, 7 feet long, and this 4-inch piece of tubular steel or aluminum flies off from under the center of the vehicle and then you get to wear it with the front of your car. Does it happen? Absolutely it happens. Wheels fall off cars. I was in a bus, and we chartered a bus to take my students to a convention, the Computer Electronics Show in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was in the front of the bus talking to the bus driver to keep him awake. And across the divided highway came rolling a tractor-trailer wheel and tire coming right toward the front of the bus. The front of the bus was this great big glass assembly, 2 windows. That couple 100-pound tire rolling at 60, 70 miles an hour toward us would have taken out the bus. Fortunately, we saw it, told him, he swerved, we didn't hit the tire, and it rolled right off into the ditch. These kind of things actually happen. You need to be prepared for it. So my answer, Rich, is I want to be away from people. I want to be away from all this grand stupidity. How is it possible that someone didn't pay attention to the wheel and tire assembly on that tractor trailer, and that wheel and tire assembly came flying toward us? Was it a bearing failure? Did somebody forget to check the rear axle lubricant? Did they forget to check the wheel bolts that hold the wheel on? What happened? Was it just a mechanical failure? I don't know. But it was certainly extremely dangerous. Because if we were going 60 and it was going 60 miles an hour, that would have been a 120 mile an hour impact. So I'm seeing lots of stupidity everywhere I go. And that's why I live where I live. And I suggest you consider doing the same thing. Because as I see it, and as our class sees it, and as your instructors see it, things are getting worse. Not better, worse. Did I overstate that, Rich?
No, the whole system's bought and paid for, Vince. Credentials now trump common sense. Hey, I'm just looking at the time, buddy. Is it okay if I try to go through why interest rates I feel are going to go down? Just so
you've got the floor.
Can have a little ammunition after this next break.
Yep, you've got the floor. I'm going to sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee, and listen to the update. We'll be back with Rich Scheben. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, the economic update.
All right. I haven't done this in a few weeks, folks, and I know I do get requests for these. And I try to put it in perspective that of things that you don't really hear from the mainstream media, because the little guy has no representation, protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law anymore. So this is why I think interest rates will probably go down or at least stay the same. The first example I have here is there's so much talk about labor force being so tight, basically unemployment. Well, if it was so tight, then supply and demand would have wages go up. In fact, they'd be going up a lot compared to how the powers that be are saying the economy is. Same thing with interest rates. Now, the labor market isn't that strong or accurate, especially with unemployment, underemployment numbers. Same thing with CPI and inflation. Lower unemployment claims are due to basically the gig economy that we have turned into, where many are self-employed contractors, and the numbers are cooked and rigged on top of it. Now, there's one constant that even though we're in QT, quantitative tightening, one constant is whether it be our central bank or other central banks, there's still printing going on. There's still stock buybacks going on. So cash and cheap credit is available, and unfortunately it's going to the wrong people. We need QE for the people, and I talked about that in great detail over the last couple of years. And equities are still overbought because of stock buybacks, one of the reasons. So without stock buybacks, basically the people would be yelling Geronimo. Now, who'd be yelling Geronimo? It's not the average Joe. It's the top 10% because the average Joe can't afford stocks or equities, and they definitely can't afford the risk with the fundamentals, the markets, and all these terms that I've talked about already earlier in the show, which have been redefined. So You got to look at the fact that we have over $9 trillion in corporate debt. So that's to the moon. We have zombie companies, government debt to the moon. And you got to look at, remember how I talked about selling the narrative? You got to look at the corporate earnings, because after tax numbers, they benefit big time, especially from the 2008 tax cuts, which had nothing to do with better business practices or productivity. So there's basically creative accounting occurring at a lot of levels as well. And when you look at the 2019 quarter one corporate earnings, they're looking pretty poor. But don't worry, the revisions will take care of that. Okay, everything gets revised, only for the benefit of not the little people, but of selling the narrative. They say we're supposed to have QT until September. Now, remember, whether it be easing or tightening, there's typically a half-year lag time. And what the benefit of that is to manufacture the narratives of why that happened. Product shipments are declining, including the Baltic Dry Index, West Coast port imports, domestic trucking. Over the last 4 months, we have the highest percentage of IPOs, initial public offerings, with negative earnings. That should be a big red flag to our future economic growth. Manufacturing is slowing in the U.S. and Europe. PMI wholesale numbers are dropping. All this talk about these trade deals with China, from what I read, I don't think there's going to be a revision. And people talk about, well, we have to have a trade deal with China because they have this great GDP number. Well, from what I read, cut their GDP in half, because you're looking at a country who doesn't care about intellectual property, patents, copyrights, etc. Do you really believe what they say? And their GDP is typically related to, greatly related to real estate. And we know that they have built a lot of zombie cities over the years that are unoccupied. So cut their GDP in half, and keep in mind China also, they don't come out with revisions. So if things need to be changed for the right reasons, at the end of the quarter, after 15 days, they just come out with their number, and they say that's it. Period. Next, we have a decline in sales, new orders, hiring practices, basically only increase when money printing occurs. In other words, stimulus, pumping money, while inventories are growing in almost every industry. Interest rates and the yield curve, we've talked about that. The inversions many times. What happened from 1 month to 10-year is probably at least 25 different yield curve inversions over the past few months. Next, the Fed admitting quantitative easing could be useless. Now think about that admission. So that means we could literally go from a deflationary, stagflationary situation into a hyperinflationary situation. Loss of confidence is a very fickle thing.
Yeah, hold that thought. We'll be right back. OffGridMontana.com. Rich Scheben, please continue with the economic update.
Well, thanks, Vince. I was talking about the Federal Reserve note before the break. Now, what happens if we bail out the banks, bail out the big corporations again? What happens if there's a special drawing right, which means a basket of currencies? What happens if the Federal Reserve note comes back from abroad, which is probably 2-3 times the amount as greenbacks abroad across the ponds than there is here in the States? What happens if we lose the petrodollar status, the world reserve currency status? I read about this stuff every day, on top of the news that I'm telling you and the news that I have been telling you. This isn't to create doom and gloom, folks. This is to make you think outside the box, make you prepare, think about the basics like food, water, and shelter. That's why we talk about buying land and varied topography and the things we've discussed. Just 3 articles right here. It's only April, and U.S. retailers have already shuttered more stores than they did all of last year. All of last year. Shuttered is a key, a code word for closed. The next article, the joy of earning billions and paying no taxes. Here's a list off a zero hedge of 60 corporations that don't pay taxes. Next article, Deutsche Bank still has $49 trillion in derivatives despite a $354 billion U.S. bailout. You heard that correctly. So the central banks, it could be us, it could be the BOJ, Bank of Japan, could be the ECU, it could be the Switzerland National Bank, it doesn't matter. The elite are all in it together to be creative with accounting, whether it be buying stocks or buying bonds, just to keep the farce going their way for their own benefit, because they don't want the system to change. Now, you look at housing starts and permits, they're basically sucking away. Now, there's been some recent housing starts that have increased in certain parts of the country, but yet the prices have gone down. Now, when people homestead and they build a house, regarding housing starts, it's not typically the average Joe. It's typically the wealthier people. Now, you look at retail sales growth, 6,000 stores have already closed down. That includes auto factories as well. And despite there's been some positive gains in March retail, but mostly it's because of credit cards. So when the average Joe goes out and purchases something because they have a lot of despair, but they don't have the cash, but they need to have something that makes them feel good, they go out and they're buying it on credit cards. And that, of course, decreases savings and increases debt, which is the wrong direction that the bottom 93% of people need to go. So the whole system is basically enriching the insiders. Now, American business growth, now this was in a survey, so you can, I'm sure the powers that be are going to debate this, in April hit a 31-month low. American business growth in April hit a 31-month low. Now, when you look at Keynesian economics, you look at the Federal Reserve and just the SWIFT system, the central bank system in general, it's based on population growth. Now, you've heard me many times blame the central bank corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, group identity politics, which in short is lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job based on what group you're in. That does not empower anybody, especially that group, an individual, or a nation. It destroys them. Now, when you look at demographics, which is the fourth reason that I've talked about, and I've talked about this stuff in great, great detail over the years. Demographics, folks. I mentioned how the number one growth group earlier, through 2050, is going to be the old people. Okay, now think about this. Peak spending in America for the last few generations is between 45 and 47. Peak spending in America for the last few generations is from 45 to 47. So as you have this big clump, this largest demographic growth group going into retirement, getting old, they've obviously passed the peak spending years. So what we should be concentrating on, and I don't know if we should do it via a law or some type of light at the end of the tunnel program that's going to benefit the people, but that should be for production, for job growth, things of that nature, not for personal consumption. And this is just some of the reasons that I feel interest rates should go down, and I would personally love to see long rates go really far down. And I know I've talked about QE for the people many times, but we have to admit that we're in a deflationary, stagflationary environment. And as long as we continue the central bank printing, as long as we continue this Keynesian economic nightmare, when in doubt, inflate, changing money supplies with, printing money, changing the growth of economy, none of that works. GDP is not equivalent to happiness. We have to get rid of all those old acronyms and definitions and look at things like saving. Look at getting out of debt. We can't continue to insult the work ethic, the ability, the intelligence of all these people with group identity politics. It just degrades and disrespects and depresses the people. So we can't allow the powers that be to hold on to the narrative. The little people have to do the reading, the research, and the talking. And because everything for us is speculation or hedging. And I think we need to start investing in ourselves, like buying some land, because we have a new era coming in of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, and the technocracy that comes with it. It's not to benefit the people. Think about all these politically correct buzzwords that I've mentioned over the years: equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, prosperity. Do you guys feel more prosperous? The middle class is becoming extinct. It has nothing to do with it. These are words to satisfy you temporarily. It's all professional wordsmithing. It's Hegelian dialectic. It's all fake and phony. So we need to think of ways to survive. Never mind thrive. We got to think of ways to survive, and it's got to be outside the box. And that's one of the reasons that we talk on USA Prepares about not forgetting the past. In other words, relearning those lost 19th century skills, but dovetailing those with 21st century technology. Because we have groomed and cultivated, especially our two youngest generations, to not be thinkers. They have been groomed to be followers, and they don't have any skill sets. And that's why the powers that be, I've given thousands of examples on how colleges, 90% of the degrees are worthless. They're calling everything racist, everything white supremacist, even math. How can math be racist? It's the dumbing down of America. And I've given thousands of examples over the years on how we've been distracted. Bread and circuses are a great example. Or dumbed down. I've given thousands of examples of that. And distracted. They're tearing us apart by groups. And if we don't drop the hyphen from being Americans, we're not going to survive. Because they're destroying us by race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, even generation. Everything's a race bait, a gender bait, a sexual orientation bait. We have to control the narrative, folks. And the only way to do it is to read up, research up, and speak up in that order. Vince?
You said something that I found quite interesting. And I've read the same articles that you have regarding the subject, that math is racist. I've got to tell you, Rich, if I were chatting with someone and that person said to me, math is racist, my immediate response would be 3 words. You're an idiot. I mean, really.
It's a divide and conquer strategy. That's all it is. It's putting one group against another. And people are waking up to that, Vince.
Math is factual, unless we're lying with statistics. But, gosh, I really would say that. I would say that person is an idiot. I mean, Rich, we've talked about, wouldn't it be nice to have good news on USA Prepares? Well, it's hard. It's really hard to have good news. Because yesterday there was a coronal mass ejection that reached the sun, reached from the sun to the earth. And astronomers said that the northern lights that are visible, normally they're kind of a yellow and reddish and orange. Well, this one was purple and green. And it hit the earth, but fortunately there wasn't much damage, if any. But it could have taken us out. It literally could have taken us out yesterday. The most famous of these coronal mass ejections was a storm that happened in 1859, a solar storm. And these charged particles during a solar flare blasted the Earth's atmosphere. And they set both ends of telegraph lines on fire. That's how much energy the sun had. And now we are so dependent on electronics, so dependent. What would happen? What would happen? And I have some suggestions. I got some information sent to me about this new device that you can hook to your electrical panel that will protect your house from an EMP. Well, sort of. But the technology's been around for a long time. It's called metal oxide varistors, MOVs. And those are the little disc-shaped devices about the size of they could be the size of a dime, the size of a nickel, the size of a quarter, inside these surge protectors. And they absorb these surges and send them to the ground connection, the center part of your 120-volt plug or receptacle. Well, you can buy common breaker replacements, circuit breaker replacements that you take off your electrical panel cover and you plug in a replacement 2-position breaker, and it will have metal oxide varistors, or MOVs, and it will ground excess current. That's a really good start. But you don't have to buy the latest and greatest, several $100 one. You can buy one for less than $100, and you can do it yourself. So I suggest you consider that, and I suggest you also use surge protection throughout your house. And even more important is unplug electrical devices you don't want to get blown. That's the big one right there. Unplug them, including the phone. Class, if you've ever been to the beach on the East Coast, you might have seen these single-engined airplanes pulling a banner advertising something, across the ocean as you're on the beach. You're looking out over the water and you hear the roar of the engine, and you look up and there's this silly banner being pulled by an airplane. Well, I've got some great news. Now, in Russia, they were going to put up a lot of satellites. They're called Cube, C-U-B-E, sats. Cube sats, C-U-B-E-S-A-T, as in cube satellites. And they were going to have these satellites in space, and they would be illuminated so that you could see things like drink Pepsi and other kinds of wonderful advertisements in the night sky. So you look up, and the brightest thing that you'd see would be these billboards in the sky, which would be satellites. Pepsi was going to do this. And we said, when we heard about this, you know what? If they're gonna litter our skies, and we look up at night, and one thing that's not polluted yet, they're going to destroy that, boycott Pepsi. Well, I don't know if they heard what we had to say, or other people were saying the same thing that we're saying, or they just figured out themselves that this was like a dumb idea. They pulled the plug on it. They're not going to do it. Great news, right, Rich?
Well, it is great news, and that's why we have to be aware of what's happening. We have to do our own reading and research so we can stick up for ourselves, because nobody else is going to do it. We get sandblasted by the powers that be who want to, by design, hold on to the narratives, the memes, themes, talking points. They don't want to give the microphone to anybody, because they have to pull the wool over our eyes for their profit, their benefits. Look at the people who make the money in this country. They're the innovators of censorship, of surveillance, and high technocracy. Those are the people who are getting the benefits. Everybody else is going to be the sheeple who are going to be monitored. And look at the people who are who create the distractions, like bread and circuses, the actors, the professional athletes, the singers. Okay, this is all done by design, so that's why they get a lot of money. Why do the teachers get a lot of money, especially professors? Because they can basically socially indoctrinate our youth and tell them that math should be subjective. I mean, we have reached new heights of stupidity and cowardice in America. And, of course, the division. The people who are willing to stick up for a certain group so the divide and conquer strategies can continue. These are the people who are getting the recognition, who are getting the money. But if you are sticking up for truth, if you're sticking up for the little guy, if you're sticking up for commerce and capitalism, God forbid you're going to get demonized, discredited, and delegitimized around every corner. So it's up to us, people, to do something about it. A lot of people I see are giving up, and I don't blame them. But I think if we all stuck together as bottom 93%ers, not by what skin pigmentation we have, not by what gender we have, not by what sexual orientation we have, if we stuck together and gave people jobs based on merit, on hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, showing up at meetings on time, et cetera, and criteria of that nature, we could be great again. But we've allowed the narratives to control our thought. And these are all subsets under political correctness. That's what group identity politics is. That's what victim group status is. That's why Candace Owens is so hated, because people are shedding light on the strategies of divide and conquer that the powers that be are using. All subsets under political correctness, and if we stick together as little people, we can hopefully change our own destiny.
I was thinking about what you said. Since math is now subjective, I can pay my bills in what I think they should be, right? Rather than what I agreed to pay previously. So I was thinking propane is now $2.42.9 a gallon. To me, that's like 19 cents. So I think I should pay 19 cents a gallon. I mean, since it's subjective, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us here at USA Preparedness.
My pleasure, Vince.
It's always delightful being with you.